Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we're going to be talking about and maybe debating or even, fighting it out on what the essential episodes were for season 3. But before we start the murder and mayhem, let's let our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole Malcolm.
Hi, I'm Carole Malcolm. I'm the director of the Urban Fantasy Track at Dragon Con. And we do cover the show there and have been doing that ever since the formation of the track in 2013. And I've been having fun doing some virtual panels since con in 2020, which was actually virtual too. But I decided, I need to go back and rewatch some of the early seasons. I'd seen them all before, but I had not seen some of these early episodes since they originally aired. So I thought, okay, well, it's time for me to go back and revisit it now that it's all over. And, it's been a fun thing to do, keeping the flame alive for the show and the fans of the show, but also to, keep people's interest in the track as well.
Okay. Elektra?
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and editor. I specialize in science fiction, fantasy, and all sorts of speculative fiction. And you can find my work in the usual places.
Okay. Carole?
I am Carole, and I'm a fanfic writer. You can find all my work on AO3 under Firesign10. I'm on Twitter under true_Firesign10. I've been a fan since season 3, and I don't see any reason to stop.
There you go. Angela?
Hi, I'm Angela Breen. I also write under the name Cram and J. Quinn. I write urban fantasy under that pen name. And under Angela Breen, I write romantic suspense.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, and near future post-apocalyptic fiction. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all the modern worlds are ones where Sam and Dean could show up and feel right at home. I've been a fan since the middle of season 11 and binge watched all 11 seasons to catch up with the beginning of season 12. And I'm now on my 4th and a half full rewatch. Thank you, Carole Malcolm.
Sure.
Me another reason.
That's right.
So we are basing these Supernatural Fight Club episodes on the rankings that Entertainment Weekly did of the essential episodes in each of the seasons. Now, this is their opinion on what was essential, kind of looking at the big story arc and all that. Your mileage may vary, and I'm hoping it does, and we can all discuss that in detail. But let me tell you what they usually picked about 5 episodes as being essential out of each season. And as you know, most seasons had somewhere between 20 to 23 episodes, except for season 3, which only had 16, I think, due to the writer's strike. And of course, that's the one we're on, so it's a little shorter. So the essential, pardon?
I thought we were doing season 2.
Season 2. Well, bear with me then, because I'm going to have to find that one.
Like, hold on, I'm not prepared.
Like, I've got my notebook right here, but
I've got that link now. So here are the essential episodes in season 2, according to Entertainment Weekly. In My Time of Dying, Croatoan, Tall Tales, Hollywood Babylon, and What Is and What Should Never Be. And I'm sorry, All Hell Breaks Loose 1 and 2.
Okay.
Now they counted those as essential, and everything else they counted as not essential. What do you think? Starting with you, Angela.
So I think one of the really, really important episodes that they left out is children shouldn't play with dead things. And I think that it's really important because they seem to have covered, fairly well. Like, they only have a few episodes, Sam's arc, but it seems like they ignored Dean's. And that one is really important for Dean's arc for this, and where he ends up in All Hell Breaks Loose. And at
Okay.
the end of What Is and Never Should Be, Should Never Be.
Okay. And why do you think that?
Because he goes from being, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched this season, go watch it. He goes from having been really angry at his dad for selling his soul to the devil to save Dean's life, to making the same deal to save Sam's life. And he gets a year with Sam, but still, that means that's a year for Sam to be tortured about it and angry about it. And in particular, in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, Dean keeps saying what's dead should stay dead. He says it 4 or 5 times. And somehow he gets from there, from that anger to, I'm going to do the same thing to my brother.
There are so many of those early episodes where they say things and you're just shaking your head going, oh, honey, you just have no idea what's coming your way.
Just wait.
Yep.
Just wait. You're going to eat those words.
In
Carole?
terms of what you just said,
Mhm.
there's 2 things that they didn't mention that fit right in there. One is Crossroad Blues, that really, really goes deep dive into Crossroads bargains and what happens to people who make those bargains, and the whole going to hell, starting with Robert Johnson in the most famous Crossroads bargain of all. And I gave that one at the very least an honorable mention and possibly a must-see. And the other one that I gave an honorable mention to along that is Houses of the Holy, which is not a great episode, but there's this whole long dialogue between Sam and Dean talking about angels, where Sam says, there's a ton of lore on angels. And Dean says, well, yeah, there's some stuff that's in the lore that's just bullcrap. And angels fall on the side of bullcrap. And he is absolutely adamant about that. And yeah, there will be the deal, there will be the year. And then at the end of it, Dean will be in hell, and some point in the future, we will find out about angels.
Carole Stokes?
The trouble with season 2 is that it is an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, exactly.
Season 2 is just redolent with fantastic episodes. So first, looking at the essentials that EW picked, I totally agree with In My Time of Dying. Wonderful. Croatoan, marvelous. I loved Telltales and the introduction of the trickster. What Is and What Should Never Be is just spectacular. I haven't met a single person ever who didn't love that episode. I mean, it's just, it delves into so many things from so many angles, and it's so rich. I actually was a little surprised that they included Hollywood Babylon. I thought Hollywood Babylon was a very fun episode. I love Dean as the PA who's constantly ransacking the craft table, and I liked the storyline of it and everything, but I wouldn't say, to me, I would pick over that. I would pick Crossroad Blues, because we get that whole setup of the Crossroads demons that becomes a big player in several episodes. I would pick Playthings, where Sam is wrestling with his own possible evilness and everything, plus I love the whole Haunted Inn storyline. I would pick Born Under a Bad Sign. I mean, first time we find out about, how vulnerable even the Winchesters are to being, I think we've only met someone possessed the very first time with Meg, and now it's like, oh my gosh, they possessed, one of our key guys here. And Jared's performance as Meg possessed Sam is, just it's so good.
Yeah. I have a note in my notebook about while I'm watching that episode that says, man, I forget how I exactly depicted him, but it was like, I think I said scary. Scary Sam is really creeping me out.
Oh my gosh.
You know,
it's
I mean,
so good.
he did a great job.
I loved Folsom Prison Blues. I loved them being in that whole prison atmosphere. And once again, a nice solid case. The whole thing in the end with like, they're in this, you know, you think, oh, here they are. And here's the cops coming to get them. And here they are. And then you realize the lawyer sent them to the wrong cemetery, and the musical cues for that. And all of that was just so beautifully done. That, you know, I would have maybe picked those even over Hollywood Babylon, which is not to denigrate it. I thought it was a good episode, but not compared to some of these ones where we not only had an enjoyable case and good suspense, but we really at some point learned something deep about these characters and about their world, and walked away with a bigger piece of that puzzle, you know, and we're moved, like not just, oh, that was cool, and yeah, Dean got to bang her and stuff, but like moved, you know, emotionally about what they had just gone through.
Mhm. Carole Malcolm?
Well, I had a couple of those on my list as well, that in the time of my dying, I mean, you know, you kind of have to, especially after the way they left it at, you know, the season 1 finale, you pretty much have to, you know, be invested in this first episode. And I think they did do a good job, you know, with all of that. And the fact that we finally get John admitting to Dean, I'm really proud of you for what you've done. You did all these things and never complained, you know, and for him to finally get that recognition, you know, of course he did it because he knew he was going to die, but I'm saying, you know, still the fact that he did it at all was something.
Better late
And
than
I
never.
thought it was also interesting that I think it was the doctor who comments to Dean, that, boy, you must have an angel watching over you or something, which we find out later is actually true, but, you know, or in a sense anyway. So that one I agree, that is also on my list. And then, you know, what is and what should never be. I again, that one, I don't think you can watch that one and not find some of the bits of humor in it, but, you know, but also, you know, how poignant it can be, even though these people aren't real and are in fact trying to get him to do something else. Or, but that I think the two that aren't on there that I would put there that probably for me had a really important meaning. First off was the third one, Bloodlust, with the one where Amber Benson is playing the vampire Lenore. And first off, we have Dean coming face to face with Gordon, who is what he could become if he didn't have Sam to temper things, or if he didn't, you know, Gordon just had, you know, he had blinders on, and, you know, that's all he wanted to see. And I think that, you know, he keeps saying there's no gray. There's no gray in our world. It's either white or black, and you know what you have to do. And they, in fact, find out that there is gray. And they find out in this very episode. And Dean even wonders, you know, after meeting Lenore and after she pulls herself back after being tortured by Gordon and doesn't, you know, actually transform and go after anybody, even after he's dripping blood in her face, that, you know, then Dean visibly is affected by this, that, wait a minute, maybe all these monsters aren't monsters. And he does say that to Sam. You know, he says, well, what if we've, you know, how many other people or how many other of these supernatural creatures, beings, whatever, have we killed that really aren't, you know, doing anything wrong, or, you know, they aren't hurting anybody? Because that's what Lenore even says. She says something about, let's see, I do have the passage marked. She says, we have a right to live. We're not hurting anyone. And which also kind of echoes what, well, it's a step further than what Luther, the vampire who John took out with a colt in season 1, he had said, well, why can't we just be left alone and just allowed to live like anybody else? But what she says is because they were subsisting on cattle blood. And for me, that's a significant step in the series, because it means that you might be monster hunters, but you have to look at the world in a slightly different way. And then in episode 16, Roadkill is the other one that I think really had an impact on me, because we get the Molly, the Trisha Helfer character, who says, you hunt these things, but you don't know what happens to them. We don't know at that time that she's actually a ghost herself, but it doesn't know she's a ghost. But the fact that, again, it's calling into question, you have to be thinking about the further implications of what you're doing. And obviously, I think that they do from, later on, because you can't sustain a show for 15 years if it was all just black and white. You just can't do that. So those two to me were, are ones that I had on my list.
I love what everybody said, and I totally agree. I think while Hollywood Babylon was fun and cute, and it was kind of a lighter one, it doesn't take the arc or the character development anywhere. And the two I'd substitute, and it's really hard because you just want to say, well, all of them were important. But the two I would be Night Shifter, because that gives us Agent Henriksen, as well as Shirtless Dean. Never turn down Shirtless Dean. And you've got that great music with Styx and Renegade at the end. And we actually see the boys, they've had some close calls, but now they're up against the FBI. And just Dean in the car at the end going, we are so screwed. This is a whole lot bigger than just outrunning the, county mounties because they dug up a grave. And so kind of takes the risk to the next level. And also Hunted, because we get to see more of Ava, who's so important in All Hell Breaks Loose. And they're worried about Ava, and she is, whether she has gone bad yet or whether she's just playing them, she does save Sam's life. And of course we have Gordon using Dean as bait and trying to blow Sam up. And so those to me seem to have more to do with the overall arc for the season than something like Hollywood Babylon.
I think there's a possibility that they chose Hollywood Babylon mainly because it's kind of, I'm sure that they get a kick out of seeing these people lampooned. They know this kind of, they work in the industry, so they're used to seeing that. That's my guess as to why it was on there. And I know when I was watching it, I thought to myself, well, after the really two emotional episodes that came before it, with Roadkill and Heart, then you've got this one. And I thought, okay, well, that's good. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I think that might be one reason that it's on there, is that they see something in it that maybe the rest of us don't. We think it's funny, but they can see, oh, yeah, I knew an exec producer like this person, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think we don't want to not appreciate Hollywood Babylon for that very thing where we've had these, Heart, oh my God, we just saw them go through this, Sam go through this terrible, terrible trauma, and Dean going through the terrible trauma of watching Sam go through the terrible trauma, is so, it's so well done and everything that, oh my gosh, we needed a break. Just in the rhythm of the season, we needed to kind of catch our breaths and remember that there were some lighter moments like Dean attacking the craft table,
right.
These taquitos,
Other ones that we haven't mention yet here is Everybody Loves a Clown,
Mhm.
because that's
Yes.
the first time they go to the Roadhouse. And, you know, Ellen, Joe, and Ash all become important characters. And before this, they didn't really know that hunters talked to each other and compared notes and gave cases to each other.
And hung out together by
Yeah,
choice,
they just didn't know, you know. And there's a line in Bloodlust where Gordon says, "You know how hunters are," and Dean says, "No, we really don't,"
Right.
because they just haven't been exposed to that. The other one that I think, well, that I find particularly amusing, that appeals to a different set of people, is No Exit, because I think it's the only episode that's based on a real person. The villain's a real guy from history, which is just a cool thing that they didn't do again.
Yeah,
Which I think is interesting because H.H. Holmes, and of course his story is in Devil in the White City.
Yeah.
Was the guy who built a murder castle in Chicago for the World's Fair, and they think killed at least 200 people. They're not really sure, but I thought it was fascinating that they don't track the ghost to Chicago. They're tracking him to the prison in Philadelphia, and
Right.
I love that historical accuracy.
I love the whole concept of them dealing with, you know, like he's supernatural because they're dealing with his ghost, his spirit, but on the other hand, they're dealing with, you know, like Elektra said, they're dealing with a historical, real person, you know. And I actually didn't know that much about Holmes before this episode. Then I had to go read up all about him and stuff, the acid baths.
That's easy enough to find.
Yeah, but I mean, I just, as when the very first time I saw that episode, it didn't dawn on me that this was in fact until
Real person.
like, oh, so it was really interesting that they mined that story, you know, for that, and it was super creepy.
Well, they really should have tried to draw in the true crime people with that.
Yeah.
Well,
brought them in a whole new audience.
That's one of the things that I thought they did really well, because I come from a serial killer background. That sounds creepy, but but what they did with Sam and Dean was they actually used kind of like a profile like the FBI would use to catch him in order to figure out where he would be and where he would have taken Joe. So I, as a crime buff, really appreciated that. And I loved that they had a serial killer as a ghost and they had to figure out how to trap him because they couldn't salt and burn his bones. That was also really fun. And it was the idea that he's trapped and tortured forever. I'm sorry, but that was pleasant given what he did in his life.
Right.
It was a really well done episode.
Yeah, I really liked that one too.
Well, and you know, I loved Houses of the Holy when I did the rewatch. When I had seen it before, it was kind of like, okay, got a ghost. Didn't turn out to be God. It was just a ghost, and it's kind of a vengeful priest. And then when I watched it again this last time, especially after having, you know, just been through seasons 14 and 15, it felt so much more prescient. And I remember seeing an interview or reading an interview about Jensen saying that when they did this episode, he and Jared were kind of uncomfortable and they were sort of afraid that the show was going to go on a sort of a soapbox. And they actually sat down with Chris Kripke and said, you know, fill us in, we're not real comfortable with this. And he reassured them. And then somehow they got over that reluctance, because fast forward to season 15 is let's go kill God. I don't know what, you know.
Well, by then it was clear God wasn't really a good guy.
Yeah.
Or their version anyway. Chuck was no fun. He had to go.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not debating that. It's just, you know, there's some personal exploration there.
Right. Well, and that, you know, that actually brings up a point, and I agree with you. I actually had some of the passages between the conversations between Sam and Dean where, well, this is one where Dean says there's no higher power, there's no God, there's just chaos and violence and random unpredictable evil that comes out of nowhere and rips you to shreds. And then during this conversation, he says that they're one of the perks of the job. We don't have to operate on faith. We can know for sure because they have, you know, the things that they see. And so I did like that episode a lot too, because of that, because it did have some of the things, you know, coming up when you find out, I think, isn't it in that episode where Dean says that Mary told him, yeah, that angels were watching over them, that was the last thing she ever said to them. And so, I mean, all of these things that kind of, I think of them as being sort of foreshadowing. But what I was going to say too is that it kind of surprises me, and I never, at least that I never heard about it, that the show was ever faced with a bunch of boycotts and religious people. I mean, you know, people that were outspokenly upset about some of the stuff on the show. And I thought, considering how some others have gotten hit with different things over the years, I thought, you know, because there's some fairly subversive stuff on here. And, you know, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that it could be considered that. And that, you know, I've always been kind of surprised that there was not this big outcry over the show. So I don't know.
I think it slid under the radar by being on the
Yeah.
WB and then the CW, and not on one of the major broadcast channels.
Well, and it's a network aimed at a younger audience, which may help. The people that would get upset about that just aren't watching it.
I think one of the things I really liked about Houses of the Holy was that you had people who themselves were in fairly desperate life situations, and they did something bad, but in the sense that they were working for good. So there was some interesting depth in there in terms of like good, bad, you know, who's good, who's bad. Yeah, you don't go around killing people, but hey, the guy was a pedophile or something, you know, that kind of thing. So there was an interesting, again, a lot of grayness wrapped up in there. And I also loved that at the end, again, just beautiful timing, you know, with Dean chasing after the guy and them exercising Father Gregory, and it was back and forth and back and forth. And by the time that pole goes through the would-be rapist, it's exquisite. I mean, just the timing was just so beautiful. And even Dean is like, oh,
yeah,
he's even taken aback that, wow, what are the odds that that's just coincidental, or was in fact there a little tap from a celestial hand, you know? So once again, a lot of debate about what's good, what's evil, who's good, who's bad, is there a God, is there not a God? And they packed it all in this, you know, interesting little 40-minute case. You know,
well, and you know, the thing that kind of breaks my heart watching it, again, knowing how everything goes, is Sam is so hopeful. Sam is so excited that the angels could be real, because he prays, and Dean kind of mocks him for that at first. He makes up for it later, but you know, and to find out, I mean, Dean later says, look, if that gets you through, I'm okay with it. But the righteous man doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe in angels, and the boy with the demon blood so much wants the angels to be real. And knowing what's going to happen just, you know, hurts my heart, because poor Sammy, you know, is just going to get the dirty end of the stick here, and
again and again and again.
Say over and over and over.
Yeah, and there's a part where where Sam sees a picture of the Archangel Michael, I think it is. It's hanging up in the church, and he's like, boy, those angels, they look fierce. And I'm thinking, just you wait, dude, just you wait. And you're gonna be saying that over and over again.
One of the things I think somebody had mentioned Folsom Prison Blues, and there were some great moments in that episode. Of course, that's where Jared and Jensen met Cliff, who becomes their longtime bodyguard. He played Tiny in the episode. The guy who had the big guy who had the heart attack, who beat Dean up, later becomes their bodyguard for real. But that one moment where Sam says, "Does it bother you how well you fit in here?"
Yeah,
He's like, the food is great. I'm the king of the block because I can beat everybody at poker and win all the cigarettes. And he's like, you don't even smoke. And he's like, but it's money.
right. This is the currency of the realm.
So
Yeah,
good. So good.
in the beginning, when they first are going in, he's telling Sam, "Well, don't worry, Sammy, I won't trade you for smokes," or something. It was pretty funny. Yeah.
And let me just add, there is a whole new section of fanfic that was born from that episode.
Oh, yes.
Fanfic is its own thing. It's got its own little section here where Dean and Sam are in prison and all kinds of shenanigans ensue. And
Yes.
yes. Yeah, it was one of those things where a trope was born.
But that's also there. But the Roadhouse lives on much longer in fan fiction than it did in the show. Just like Missouri Mosley and some of the folks like Caleb and Pastor Jim and all those folks who barely make it through an episode or two,
Right.
live so much longer and have much more interesting things in fan fiction. So that is kind of if there's a piece of this. If there's a piece of one of the shows that you really like and wish you could have seen more of, it probably has its own subgenre in fan fiction, in case you're looking for that.
And you can pinpoint, like here, here you can pinpoint, here's where this happened, or here's where that happened. And,
well, I think the other one I wanted to come back to was Born Under a Bad Sign, because of course that's the Meg episode where she makes Sam kill people. And in doing the season 4 rewatch for the next rewind with the Dragon Con panel, I just watched the episode Metamorphosis with the witnesses, not Metamorphosis, the next one with the witnesses. Are You There, God? It's Me, Dean Winchester. And Meg's ghost comes back to accuse them. Did you ever think this is who I was before Meg cut off my hair and dressed me, like a hooker? Did you ever think that there was a girl in there before you threw me out the window? And so having just watched that and then thinking about Born Under a Bad Sign, no, they really didn't. And we didn't either. And kind of makes the whole thing, yes, Meg was tormenting Sam, but the demon was tormenting Meg. So kind of some layers there that we get in the hindsight with some of the future episodes. Out of the rest of the other episodes, what have we not discussed here? Is there anything we missed?
Playthings.
We've got the usual suspects.
Playthings.
Playthings, yes, with the doll. Okay.
Yeah, that's what my note about that one is. Oh, great. Creepy dolls and creepy kids. I mean, it was a double whammy.
Lady.
Yeah.
Creepy.
Well, the one thing, okay, I have a question. The grandma who was up in what the heck was she doing up in that creepy room? I mean, why did they have her in that hidey hole place in the first place?
Yeah, how did they get her up and down? Did she just have to stay there all the time?
Yeah, I mean, that just kind of bothered me at the time. So yeah.
I mean, she had a nice window, I guess, but some friends and family around might be nice.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just love the whole bit though with Sam, making Dean promise, you have to kill me. Like, you have to promise, don't let me hurt anybody. You have to, and ripping Dean's heart out by doing so
again.
And then driving again. Yeah, again. And working so hard to save that little girl, because like everyone he could save was one more mark for his redemption. But he wasn't even doing it selfishly. He was like, I have to save everybody I can. I just have to save everyone I can while I can. So I really loved that. And we actually haven't really talked about Croatoan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Croatoan, man, there is a lot of creepiness, with everybody going kind of crazy psycho and they don't know what's going on. And you have the doctor trying to be this, calm and person of science, even though she doesn't know what's going on. And again, then Sam saying, again, you have to kill me. And we don't even realize until later what kind of groundwork they're laying here, in terms of what we're going to run into in later seasons. But it's just, here they are, they're completely cut off. They don't know what's going on. And they just try to keep soldiering on until, even Dean is like, if you're going down, I'm going down with you.
Who would have ever thought that in a pandemic outbreak, some people would turn violent? I mean,
Yeah.
where did that come from?
I'm gonna need my inhaler for that.
Yeah, storytelling just gave us some great brother moments, and that's obviously a favorite. Really seeing their dynamic early on in the show, just like Playthings gave us a look at morose drunk Sam, who thinks that Dina is bossy and short.
And that part was hilarious. It really, I just, it's those little tiny humorous touches that get us through some of the drama and the dark and the angst, when he's like heaving his guts out in the morning and Dean's like, pork sandwich in a greasy ashtray. Now, I didn't realize at the time that was a thing. It's like a song lyric or something. And I didn't know. I was just like, well, that's disgusting. And then
I thought he was just trying to make him hurl.
My husband, well, but it's a real song lyric or something, because my husband's like, oh, that's from blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what?
Right.
You never know where Kripke's going to pull things from.
And they pulled so heavily from music for the episode titles and all kinds of things.
Yeah, I was going over the list of episodes and I was like, oh yeah, so the first one's In My Time of Dying. And my husband's like, oh, Led Zepp song. I was like, you have no idea how many of the episode titles are songs, from all over. And
well, and then, Silent Lucidity and Heart, when he kills her, is just, I wasn't familiar with the song at the time, but it certainly made me look it up and become much more familiar with it. And certainly everybody who did know the song just went, yeah. One of the other ones we haven't mentioned really at all is The Usual Suspects.
I'll put in a good word for The Usual Suspects.
Okay, please do.
First off, for just the writing of it, because I loved all of the cop interviewing them scenes. Those were really, really well done. And also just Linda Blair was fantastic in that. And all of it was just apparently a setup so they could do the pea soup joke at the end.
Yeah, right.
But it was a really well done episode. I thought it was just, it doesn't do anything for the future really, other than it's a well plotted, well written episode, and it's a lot of fun.
I think one thing I liked from it as well is I agree that it didn't necessarily progress an arc, but it was a very solid, I would have even ranked it higher, but there's just so many great episodes in this season. It's kind of hard to, the whole Death Omen thing. We got to meet a new kind of spirit, the Death Omen, which I thought was creepy AF. I was like, oh my God. The first time I saw it, I was really taken aback. So, it was always interesting to meet a new kind of, not even a critter, because it's not a supernatural animal thing, but a new monster of the week kind of thing. Every so often they threw it back out, about a Death Omen, but I did really enjoy that episode.
Well, and the cleverness of working out the whole Dana Schultz anagram and what did it mean and what could it mean, and that was just so sharp for both of the boys.
especially since they weren't even together.
Yeah,
You know,
that I liked
hanging
that
out in,
aspect.
like different rooms. Okay, you take this one, you take that, and yeah, that was really smart.
And Sam was just, oh, so you're the good cop, I guess. And just he wasn't having any of it. While Dean's happily picking his handcuffs.
Right.
Well,
Angela,
it's
any
another
thoughts?
Saturday night.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm
Sammy
sorry?
did pull the fire alarm or call in the false alarm. Yeah. Angela, any thoughts on stuff we haven't mentioned?
I have so much stuff because like Carole Stokes was saying, there's so many good episodes. I do want to mention in Everybody Loves Clowns, I absolutely love any time that the guys are taken down a peg by a common fear, such as flying in the first season with Dean and clowns. And they bring back clowns a few times throughout the series to scare Sam with, and I just love it every single time. So, and this one is particularly creepy.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and as you know, when I was like 5, I think I watched it for the first time. And in the old one, the little girl looked exactly like me in the beginning. So I've been terrified of clowns forever. So I can totally relate to Sam.
That's a good point. I like that you said that about the common fears, things that everybody can identify with.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Are you talking about like the miniseries one with for it?
It's the one with the guy, oh, he has a really distinct voice and he plays the clown.
Yeah, Tim Curry.
Yes, Tim Curry, the Tim Curry
Yeah.
clown.
I don't think I'm wrong. You can always double check me. But I think the little girl who grew up and became Annette O'Toole.
Yeah, no, not her. I'm talking about the little girl who dies at the beginning. Looked like me.
No wonder.
I think Becky was in that movie. The actress who plays Becky was a child actor, and I believe she's in that.
Yeah, you might be right. I'd have to look it up, but I think you might be right.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this season is what is and what should never be is their first go round at what might have been if they weren't hunters. And that's a reoccurring theme throughout the series. They go there somewhat with Lebanon, where they go back into town and discover that Sam went to school and became a lawyer, and Dean's wanted for a bunch of stuff, including a whole lot of beheadings. And
a whole lot.
There was one where Zachariah forced them into another reality. There were a number of times where they went back to that theme. And of course, Apocalypse World is the version of the world where they were never born. So
I think that that one of the things about that particular episode, though, in the what is and what should never be, is that it was almost it was based on a falsity, because it's taking a grain of what could have been and making it into something more disturbing. Because the one thing that nobody would want is for there to be a wedge between the guys that stayed there. Because that, so I think at that point, Dean had to know something was going on. So something's not quite right because of the fact that, even though he was happy that Sam seemed to be content with some of the things in his life, I think it just had to have felt wrong, that they did not get along.
I think it did feel wrong, but Dean had so much hurt over Sam leaving him to go to Stanford, and probably blamed himself for part of that. I don't know if the idea that they weren't close would have initially felt that wrong, because they weren't close for several years. He'd only just gotten Sam back, really 2 years ago, year and a half ago.
And he had mom.
Mhm.
And he had a girlfriend and a place to live. And
I think he was so happy, Dean was so happy to see Sam with Jessica, alive and well and engaged and all that. And let's not forget that Dean himself had this,
Carmen.
The Corona bottle girl, yeah.
Correct. But that was so great to see where that came from. But she was,
That was
"I'm
funny.
going to go get you a burger," and so he wasn't suffering in some regards, but he was almost willing, I think, to accept the fact that he and Sam weren't close, if in fact Sam was content in all these other ways.
And the Sam in that dream world did still insist on coming with him.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
even
right,
though he didn't
yeah.
get it.
So
The one we haven't touched on at all is Simon Said. And it's just, it's not a stellar episode, but it does advance the whole special children plot. That was creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you kind of get to see both the good and the bad, because here you have twins, although one of them didn't know it for most of the episode, but here you have twins that were both special children, and one came out good and one came out evil, so that was kind of an interesting play on. You could see, even with the specialness that had been imparted to them, it could go either way. You still had a nature versus nurture going on. So
well, and just because you've got demon blood doesn't necessarily make you a bad person.
Right.
But throw child abuse into the mix, and yeah, that'll help a whole lot.
Yeah. And they saw that as much as John Winchester's A+ parenting might not have made, the guides for doing a great job, it could have been a whole lot worse. What does Sam say? A little more tequila, a little less hunting, and that could have been us.
Yep.
Yeah.
At least John kept them on a version of the straight and narrow. May not have been ideal, but
well, to some extent, Dean was parenting Sam when John was away, and knock him all you want. Dean was a decent enough parent. He was trying to take care of Sam because John told him to, and he takes his responsibilities super seriously.
And Jeffrey Dean Morgan has said that he believes that John Winchester loved his sons with everything he had in him to give. And of course, John ended up growing up without a father, because we know what happened to Henry, although John never did. Angela, you've been quiet before we close out here. Any other thoughts you're just burning to tell us?
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because I wanted to bring up Crossroad Blues just one more time, because I think that is Dean's turning point from being mad at his dad to kind of starting to realize that this might be something he has to do for Sam, because the demon offers him the one thing that we think he wants at that point, which is 10 good years with his dad, and he turns her down. And I think in a way that was them showing us that he's kind of recognized that he has this card to play, and he's going to hold on to it until he needs to use it. And that's part of every time, you see him getting his heart broken when they're saying you have to kill Sam. I think that's a huge part of that. And it's very important for not just our understanding of demons, but Dean's arc in this series, in this season.
It was very interesting in the latest episode of Walker. There is a thread through that on Robert Johnson and Crossroad Blues, and they talk about the whole myth, and it's like, okay, we see what you did there. So any other last comments about this season before we wrap things up tonight?
Well, one thing that occurred to me when I was going through my notebook and looking at everything was, I don't think there was a bad episode in the season. I don't think there were any throwaways. I know that, everybody here obviously had their favorites, and maybe, but I haven't heard anybody say, oh yeah, I could live if I never saw that one again, or, that one should have been, that should be gone. I think that it's just a standout season for some reason. Everything seemed to work. I think it worked well in terms of kind of furthering along the story. Then there are so many instances of what seem like foreshadowing now, and yet we don't know if they actually knew what they were doing, 6 years down the road or not. But still, that's my take on the season. I just think it's a fabulous season.
Yeah, I agree. It's a stellar season. Even the ones that maybe I'm not instead of being 100% fond, maybe I'm only 85% fond.
Right.
Nonetheless, it bears up, it bears under repeated watching. Just in general, there is such energy in the writing and in the characters. Everything's very fresh. Everything's just building up, really nice momentum. We're seeing the boys really gel into their characters and relationship. And yeah, it's captivating.
Mhm. Yeah, and as somebody pointed out, the show was only supposed to go for 5 years, and it got 10 years after that. So somebody made a deal.
Good point.
They made a deal to bring the king of the Crossroads onto the show. Clearly.
There you go. Well, folks, as we wrap up, let's go around once and tell everybody where people can find you online, starting with you, Angela.
Hi, you can find me at angelabreen.club and cameronquinnbooks.com.
Cool. Carole? Stokes?
Yeah, I was going to say.
No, I'm Firesign 10 on AO3. You can find all my fic there. And on Twitter, I am true_Firesign 10. If you go check out the fic, mind the tags.
Elektra?
You can find me at untilmidnight.com. That everything is there.
And Carole Malcolm.
Yes, and the best way to find out what's going on with the Urban Fantasy Track is to go ahead and just look up on Facebook. Just type in DragonCon Urban Fantasy, and it will take you directly to our page. And that's where you get, the updates on different things that we have going on. And we will be doing our Supernatural Rewind for season 4, which will be on the 27th of this month. So 2 weeks from Thursday, and it's a live panel. It'll be at 7:00, and you can come and interact with us if you like, or you can watch it later. But we would love to have anybody who would like to come in and have some comments with us.
Awesome. And I will definitely be there for that, because I wouldn't miss it for the world. You can find me at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. Look for those names on Facebook and Pinterest and Twitter and Instagram, and you'll find me. Most of the time, you can find me here at Continual. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for sharing part of your evening and for taking on this fierce debate about the episodes of season 2. Nobody's walking away bloodied and bruised, so it's a good night.
Yeah,
and thank you all so much, and thank all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural here on Continual, so we'll see you online.